Good afternoon to all those attending this virtual meet, and good morning to Professor Karen Uhlenbeck. My name is Abel, and I am the Dean of the Faculty of Mathematics of the Complutense University of Madrid. And it is an honor for me to present Professor Karen Uhlenbeck. Professor Uhlenbeck is a reference in mathematical research, and she has numerous really relevant articles and results. She also founded the Institute for Advanced Studies, Women in Mathematics program in 1994, which aims to repair the gender gap in the mathematical research career. Karen Uhlenbeck is currently a professor emeritus at the University of Texas at Austin, as well as visiting associate professor at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, and a senior research fellow at Princeton University. She has received several prestigious awards, such as the MacArthur Scholarship or the Guggenheim Scholarship, and in 2019, she became the first woman to receive the Abel Prize awarded by the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters and awarded by the King of Norway. This award replaced the non-existent Nobel Prize in Mathematics. Karen is a specialist in partial derivative equation, but her research transcends that field. In short, today we receive a virtual visit from a woman who has to be a benchmark for mathematics around the world, as well as be a benchmark for all mathematical women who encounter obstacles in the development of their research or teaching careers. Thank you very much, Karen, to be here, to be with us. And I am very proud to receive you. Next, I give the floor to Professor Elena Vázquez. Elena?
Thanks, Antonio, and thanks to the Faculty of Mathematics of the Universidad Complutense de Madrid for hosting this online event. Dear Professor Uhlenbeck, welcome virtually to Spain. It's an honor to meet you. We, the Commission for Women in Mathematics of the Royal Spanish Mathematical Society, that I represent, want to thank you for time for this interview. Before the short introduction by Marina, I would like to tell you about the influence and impact you made on me by sharing some words I wrote about you a few years ago, in 2014, on a well-known Spanish webpage named Mujeres Conciencia. First, I read in Spanish. Biografías de mujeres matemáticas. Este es el tema. Bien, tenía que escoger una para empezar. Difícil decisión. Recordé que en mis primeros años en la investigación sentía gran admiración por K. Uhlenbeck, sobre todo desde que me enteré de que esa K quería decir Karen. En mi carrera profesional influyó el saber que había mujeres, no muchas, que luchaban por sus metas en el estudio de las matemáticas. Resulta importante dar a conocer que para esas mujeres matemáticas que están en la cresta de la ola, también hubo otras matemáticas que les sirvieron de ejemplo para lograr lo que consiguieron. Now English. Biographies of female mathematicians. This is the subject for this web page. Well, I had to choose one to start with, and this was a difficult choice. But I recall that from my early years in research, I always admired a mathematician named K. Uhlenbeck, especially when I discovered that this K was for Karen. In my career, I was determined to know that there were women, not many, but they were fighting for their goals as researchers in math. I believe it is important to show that for successful women mathematicians, there were also another female mathematicians as an example to achieve why they achieve. Thanks again, Karen. Marina, it's now your turn.
Hi, Professor Karen Uhlenbeck doesn't need an introduction, but let me say some words. As Antonio already said, she won the Abel Prize in 2019, and as he already said, this is known as the Nobel Prize in Mathematics, and she is the first and only woman in history to get this prize. She studied at the University of Michigan and got her PhD at the University of Brandeis in 1968. She held postdoctoral positions at MIT and the University of California at Berkeley, and she got her first permanent position at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 1971. Then she moved to Chicago, and finally she got the Sid W. Richardson Foundation Regents Chair at the University of Texas at Austin in 1988. She got many distinctions and awards, such as the MacArthur Fellowship, the National Medal of Science, the Leroy P. Steele Prize, well, and more. And she's an honorary member of the London Mathematical Society, the Royal Spanish Mathematical Society, and is a fellow of the American Mathematical Society, and also and more. She founded the Institute Park City, as Antonio already mentioned, and in 1994, she founded the program Women in Mathematics at the Institute of Advanced Studies. She's now emeritus professor at the University of Texas at Austin, visiting professor at the Institute of Advanced Studies, and all these positions that she holds now that our dean already mentioned. Want to say that she got the Abel Prize for her pioneering achievements in geometric partial differential equations, gauge theory, and integrable systems, and for the fundamental impact of her work in analysis, geometry, and mathematical physics. Well, Professor Uhlenbeck, would you please describe your work in mathematics for a general public and also for a more specialized public, such as graduate students thinking of a PhD?
Well, yes, I'll give first of all, I'm very glad to be here. And this might be the hardest question to describe my work for the general public. I study partial differential equations and ordinary differential equations are the methods by which physicists developed ways of describing what was going on in the world of physics. And so partial differential equations date way back to Newton and the discovery of calculus. And they started by being used to describe physical motions. But very early on, I mean, I could tell you a story after story. Mathematicians also sort of made up geometric problems that didn't come from physics, but came mostly out of the way they thought about things that had to do with what these equations did. Now, these equations, except in very few cases, cannot be solved exactly. So over the centuries since the development of calculus, we've developed methods to understand the behavior of solutions without writing down the solutions. And you can really understand how this is going to be, because if you think about, say, the partial differential equations that involve the motion of the cosmos, they're tremendously complicated, and there's no way that even a computer can actually solve them. So you develop these mathematical tools for understanding what the solutions do in certain cases that can predict what you'll see and match the equations with what you see, and also then make predictions. So, and I study more the abstract geometric equations rather than the ones that come from physics, although there's a surprising overlap. So technically, for more mathematical, what I specifically do is I basically understand how scale appears in the equations. That is, we have an equation and we can actually tend to be able to look at it in a microscope and make all the numbers larger, or look at it with a telescope and make all the numbers smaller. And that actually changes the behavior of the equations, and how those equations behave under change of scale is actually essentially very important to understanding the behavior of those. And so that's primarily how I got my work started. And I started by studying abstract geometric equations of minimal surfaces. And I worked with Jonathan Sachs to develop that theory. And then it turned out, much to my surprise, that the same techniques would apply to studying equations of gauge theory, which is a theory of equations which arise from studying elementary particle physics. And so this is a theme in mathematics, that the same tools can be used in different problems. And so now I've also worked in many different things that I got interested in. For example, I got interested in integrable systems because the integrable systems are equations that have an algebraic structure, and I was interested in understanding how the algebraic structure related to these questions of scale and behavior that I had been studying. So that's sort of a general comment about things that I've been interested in over my career.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now the natural question will be to ask you, when and how did you discover your interest in science?
Well, you know, when I was a kid, I was interested in a lot of different things. I grew up out in the country in an isolated setting, and I didn't know very many people, but we had a house full of books. And so I read my way through my parents' library. And I remember in particular reading the works of Sigmund Freud and the plays of Ibsen and all sorts of things. We lived out in the country. I didn't have many people to play with. And so, but when I was in high school, my father, who was an engineer, but who had very intellectual interests, brought home some books on astronomy. I remember those particularly by Fred Hoyle. And he read them. And in fact, I found them and I read them as well. And these are famous books by Fred Hoyle describing the cosmology and questions of the Big Bang theory or the steady state universe and how stars developed. And I got very interested in that. So I can't say that I was very interested in my schoolwork. I found it, I was a very good student and I found it quite easy, but especially in the time, this is in the 1950s in rural New Jersey, it was not a good idea for women to be smart. And so I was not very good at hiding the fact that I was excited about ideas and that I was smart, but I suffered tremendously socially from this. So when I went to college, I enrolled as a physics major because I didn't even know there was such a thing as mathematics. But well, I'll go on. I think this is the next question, though. But when I enrolled in college in 1960, in 1957, the Russians had set up the satellite Sputnik, which startled the whole world as a scientific achievement. And in response to this, the Americans decided they were way behind in science, and by 3 years later, when I started college, there were special programs to introduce and encourage women, students to study science. And it was, I remember explicitly said, this is so important that we want women and minorities as well. And actually, I think that was important because I don't think I'd ever really been encouraged to do any, nobody really cared what I was going to do because I was a woman. And this was a time that said, well, we really need scientists. We need scientists so much that we want you. And so I enrolled and I was able to get into the honors program. And basically, I fell in love with calculus my first semester in college. And so I can go on for how that developed. But that's when I first, I just liked, I still remember understanding the definition of derivatives and turning to the friend next to me and saying, are you really allowed to do that? It was such an exciting notion that one was allowed to do these kinds of things with math. Anyway, so that's how I got started.
The rules did you imagine yourself as a scientist, as a mathematician? And then what difficulties did you have or what you face in your career as a professional mathematician?
Well, actually, I did very well. I went to school in Michigan because there was no state university in New Jersey, and my mother had a brother that lived in Michigan, and so I went to the University of Michigan, and I didn't go home on vacations. And I remember, and I was very lucky during my first semester to meet a math professor in front of a painting in an art museum. My mother was an artist, so that's what I thought you did when you had free time, is you went to art museums. And I met Dan Hughes, and he got to chatting with me, and before I knew it, I was grading linear algebra without having taken it. And by my sophomore year, I took my first graduate course, which I didn't understand, but I enjoyed. And I spent my junior year in Munich on a junior year abroad program, and my undergraduate days went very well, and I was a very good student, and I liked math, and I was encouraged by my professors. There were, of course, no women professors, and I don't even recall any women graduate students, but I did have some other women that I knew who were math majors. But then, and I had no because of Sputnik then, the National Science Foundation fellowships were in place, and I got a graduate fellowship to study in graduate school for 3 or 4 years. And so things went very well. And I think the first hurdle I placed was I passed, which is probably the most important one in my career, is that I had chosen to go to NYU to graduate school because I knew there was a very famous professor, Lippmann Bears, there, who was very famous for having many women graduate students. And I had a gut reaction that I did not want to fight the battle of women. Remember, this is the early 60s, and the atmosphere was quite different there. And I was totally uninterested in women's lit. I wanted to do math. I didn't want to go out and change the world. And so when I got married at the end of my first year, and my first husband was a graduate student at Harvard, I transferred to Brandeis University. I had an NSF fellowship, and I did not even bother applying to Harvard or MIT. I knew the pressures on women there would be immense, and I elected to go to a lesser school. And I very quickly became one of the best students. And after just a few run-ins with people who didn't think I should be there, I was actually treated very well. And so I feel that I was actually very lucky in the right time and right place. So, and of course, you want to know whether there were difficulties. The answer was yes. And I circumvented them. I did not go out and try to change the world. I got out to try to go around the hurdles there were for women to do mathematics.
Well, the next question is, what would you like the most about being a professional mathematician?
Oh, the fact that you can always find new and interesting ideas to study.
Oh, that's a very good answer.
I mean, you can always, and not only that, if you get tired of doing math, you can teach, you can write books, you can give talks. It's not like your life is sitting at a desk all day. I mean, it's really. It's really, and also, by the way, I have discovered, especially since COVID, I do some of my best mathematical thinking when I'm walking. And so that's great. You know, I feel good after I walk, and I can also think when I walk. So two things go together. I can feel good doing mathematics.
So you recommend walking for all mathematicians?
Well, yeah, it's better than swimming. I don't think very much good mathematics when I swim.
Well, I have heard you talking about the influence of other sciences in mathematics, such as physics and biology. Do you think that art also has influenced mathematics, and maybe mathematics in art?
Well, now that's a very interesting question. And I actually reminded myself about the answer is that, in fact, mathematics and science has influenced art. And I don't really know too much about it, but I saw a couple years ago an exhibit at the museum at the University of California, Berkeley, on the Dimension Manifesto, which was it was a manifesto in the 1934 about how all the brand new ideas about quantum mechanics, relativity, dimensions, and so forth were important and influenced art. And they, in fact, did have a big influence on art. And I looked at the art exhibit, and I could kind of see that the answer, the other way around is that at least this kind of art didn't interest me much as a scientist or a mathematician. Somehow or other, the visual aspects that they were presenting of science did not inspire me. And so I don't really know too much about details. I do have to say my mother was an artist, and during a period of time when I wasn't able to do mathematics, I actually started to draw and paint. And I did discover the same interesting thing in art that I have found interesting in mathematics. And that's the question of working at different scales. When you have a painting, you have a big scale and you have the little scale of details, and fitting them together and making the shapes is actually really an important part of the artist's job in painting. And that's exactly what interested me in mathematics, which was fitting the small scales into the large scales and so forth. So I don't hear much people talk much about mathematics and art, though.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Should we focus on your math and maybe what is your opinion, or what is the main ingredient for a successful theorem?
The main ingredient. I think mostly that it opens up new ideas. It gives new ideas. It opens up. It gives a new insight and paves the way for new ideas. I mean,
but that's difficult.
well, I think it's yeah, but it's exciting when it happens.
I bet so. Another question. You have supported diversity in mathematics quite strongly along your career, and now through the Abel Prize. I heard that you donated some of the prize money to minorities in mathematics. Could you please tell us your views about diversity in mathematics and why it is important?
Well, Well, first of all, I experienced myself the difficulties of being an outsider in mathematics. And I have never really felt like an insider because, of course, for the beginning 20 or 30 years of my career, women were outsiders. I mean, and so part of it's just an emotional association for people who don't have all the advantages of that come from coming from an upper class background, giving access to good teachers, having a supportive community, and so forth. I feel very much for, and who despite that love mathematics, because let me tell you, when you look at the people, the diverse number of people who do mathematics, who want to do mathematics, they don't do it because it's comfortable or easy for them. They do it because they see something beautiful and are drawn to it, and they do it out of love. That is, when you see someone with all the privileges doing math, they may be just doing math because it's easy and because everybody says how great they are. Whereas you find someone from a disadvantaged population doing mathematics, they have none of those assets, and they're doing it because they really love it, because but I mean, on top of that, I think I read this in an article somewhere, and I don't know the reference was, but the thing is that science, the diverse populations don't need minority populations don't need science particularly. I mean, they have their own struggles, and it really isn't that important whether to an individual, to the community as a whole, whether there are minority scientists or not. It's essential for the scientific community to be inclusive and to include people. How would you feel today, knowing what you know, if all medical research was done by male doctors? How many of you women would trust it and have anything to do with it and have any trust in it whatsoever? I mean, the scientific enterprise is a worldwide effort, and it actually works rather well compared to, if you look at the way countries get along. Scientists get along with each other a lot better than countries get along with each other. But the modern world is very reliant on science. And in order to be effective in the modern world, science has to be inclusive. It has to include all different people of all different sorts. And so it's absolutely essential to us scientists to be inclusive.
So what your main advice for a PhD student, especially from a discriminated minority?
What? Excuse me, I didn't.
There is some problem. What would be your main advice for a PhD student, especially if the student is coming from a discriminated minority?
Well, the thing is, I think this is very tricky, since I've had a career of specifically encouraging and advising young women since the early 90s, right, where I've been. And it's a very tricky thing, because you have to balance the advantages of going to an elite institution with the difficulties that will come from being a disadvantaged students there, with being comfortable and getting access to your own brain. And you need to develop intellectually, and to develop intellectually, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable enough. You have to be a little bit uncomfortable, but uncomfortable enough to allow your brain, your abilities to flourish and to learn. And how to balance, how to do this is something that is not obvious at all. I mean, I feel I did much better by going to Brandeis than I would have going to Harvard. And in my mid-career, I actually left the position at the University of Chicago to go to a much less prestigious institution at the University of Texas, where I felt very comfortable and very able to actually achieve something in the ways of encouraging women and minorities. Whereas I felt if I had actually stayed in the elite institutions, my voice would have meant nothing to in the predominantly male atmosphere there. So it's a balance, and I don't really have advice because it's so dependent on your soul, so to speak, and you know, so there are things but the thing is, I would not be afraid to not do the obvious thing, because I think to be a good scientist does not mean you just go do the obvious thing at every step. That's not the way someone becomes a good scientist.
I see. So open our to any.
Yeah.
Okay. In Spain, we are facing a lot of women going into academia, abandoning mathematical research. I mean, we have a lot of women studying the degree, then in master, when they start the master, they finish the master, but they don't go to the PhD, and then few go to the PhD, but they don't continue their academic career. So how would you encourage women to pursue a career in mathematics?
Well, I do have to say that I think there's a misconception. I think the thing that really keeps women away is the intense competitiveness. Academia from outside looks very competitive, and it is competitive, and it's become more competitive, and it's too competitive. But there's a lack of reality of understanding things about that, because in fact, an academic career tends to be more flexible than most other careers. It's easier to adjust your schedule, to take care of a household, and to, you have take care of your parents when they die, when they get older. I mean, the responsibilities on a woman as opposed to a man when it comes to family, and also, you know, the social life of a couple always depends on the women. I don't know. So you have a lot of responsibilities, and in fact, academia is actually more flexible this way. And so the appearance of competitiveness, in fact, I don't think that academia is necessarily so competitive. It is, of course, if you want a job at the elite institutions. But at least in the United States, there's tremendous opportunities for teaching in smaller colleges and universities and community colleges. And those by and large tend to be very rewarding jobs. So I think the thing to do is not to be misled by by absolutely having to compete all the time. That is, you need to find your own way, and academia is flexible.
I see. Moving to another subject, algorithms and artificial intelligence are shaping our life everywhere. What do you think about the role that mathematicians should take in this development?
Well, I don't think should is the right word to use there. I think it's inevitable they will take a role. And it's basically the computer scientists are developing these fantastic algorithms, and you're going to need some mathematics to figure out what these algorithms are doing. And the computer scientists are actually interested in this. It's just not the mathematics that they do in trying to understand how and why those algorithms work just doesn't mesh in with any developments in mathematics, but it will. I mean, mathematics tends to be useful in any enterprise. So I don't think should is the right word. I think it's inevitable, actually.
That's right, yeah. Well, on the 12th of May, we celebrate Women in Mathematics. And then I would like to ask you, who is your favorite female mathematician in history and why?
Okay, well, I have two answers to that because it depends on how old I am. When I was young and I was a student, Sonia Kovalevskaya was an amazing woman to me. I mean, I still remember the story of her learning calculus from the wallpaper on the, she was from an upper class Russian family, and they had a villa out, a summer villa, and the wallpaper of her bedroom was covered with a calculus text. And so she had a marriage of convenience in which she left Russia and moved to Germany, and had a marriage of convenience in order to be able to study mathematics. And I mean, she had basically a very romantic, if difficult, life. She wrote a book, a story anyway, about growing up in Russia. And she certainly was, I think, given of all things, she was actually a professor of mathematics when I don't think there were any other women that were professors of mathematics.
Yeah.
But actually, and of course, when I was young, Sonia Noerte kind of frightened me. I mean, the thing is that she was this kind of unmarried woman whom everybody talked about how they hadn't treated her well in mathematics, and she had a difficult life, and the mathematicians weren't not nice to her, and so it was hard for me to understand how her life could have been good. But more recently, I actually been using some of her theorems and have actually come to appreciate, in fact, her brilliant paper on Noethe's theorem, one paper, which said everything there was to know about symmetry and conservation laws that we still need to know practically. But in the end, I came around and I realized, actually, she grew up in a mathematical family. She found support among mathematicians. There was some controversy, but there's a lot of evidence that Hilbert and Klein and the mathematicians thought very highly of her. And this is a time in which men just didn't think highly of women. So, I mean, she, in fact, gained, through being a mathematician, gained a lot of respect from her colleagues, and by and large was, in the light of what was going on then, was actually treated very well. She managed to get out of Hitler's Germany. Of course, she wasn't allowed to be a professor at Princeton or anything, but they did find her a job at Bryn Mawr. She did have colleagues, and she went once a week up to Princeton from Bryn Mawr by train, which, by the way, is a non-trivial thing to do these days. So I can't imagine, it was quite a trip then. And she also surrounded herself by a bunch of young male mathematicians, and founded a whole subject of algebra. And in fact, given the times and place, mathematics provided a great life for her. And so and with many good attributes and so forth. She also made friends with her women students at Bryn Mawr. So coming from, my 25-year-old self said, who wants a life like that? And my 75-year-old life says, that was actually, given everything, a remarkable life. And so thank you for letting me explain the difference of the attitudes of a 25-year-old and a 75-year-old.
Thank you for telling us. Well, let us finish with what will be your wish for the future?
What will be my wish for the future? That the world not collapse. I'm sorry. No, that we not have any major catastrophes. I'm not worried about myself. I mean, I don't think the world's going to go to hell in 10 years or so, you know. It may fritter away a bit, but there are so many problems. I mean, the pandemic, global warming, the sheer size of the population on Earth, the inequalities, the difficulties, and I mean, mathematics is a tremendous escape from all these difficulties. And I hope, and let's just say that, I hope in 100 years, people can still escape the immense difficulties of living by doing mathematics.
That's great. Well, I want to finish by telling you that you wanted to do mathematics and not change the world, you just say. But you did change the world, and you expanded the horizons and dreams of many female mathematicians, and we want to thank you.
Well, I'm so glad you're all here, by the way. It cost me what I would feel like if all you young women weren't here. It would be such an empty world for me.
Oh. Thank you, Karen. This was a really, really personal interview. Yes, it was very, very nice. I think we know you a little bit now, a little one in your soul, I think. Thank you very much. For me, it was an honor. I think for all the people can see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm glad I could do this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Uhlenbeck. It has been a great pleasure to hear all your answers, and please consider that the Faculty of Mathematics of the University Complutense of Madrid is your home, and we will be very, very happy if someday you will be here with us, and we will repeat this type of meeting personally. Thank you very much for your time, for your consideration, and for all your answers.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Karen.
Thank you, Karen. We keep it under 45, I think.
No, I mean, I right about now, I feel like I've said enough.
And Karen, also, you are invited to Santiago de Compostela when you like. It's one of the best parts of Spain.
We want you here.
Yes.
Have you ever visited Spain?
Yeah, once, a long time ago. Actually, you know what I remember about Spain? It's the Gaudi. They really made an impression on me. They're amazing.
Okay.
Anyway, well, I don't travel much anymore, so in a way,
I understand.
Zoom is nice for me anyway, just because I don't travel much. Okay. Anyway.
Okay.
Well, I can send you photos of Guernica if you wish. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Professor Uhlenbeck.
Bye.